when you take a look at this trade, who won on this side? Is it the Dallas Mavericks or is it the Lakers?
It's the Dallas Mavericks.
Breaking news out of the NBA, the Mavericks are expected to fire general manager Nico Harrison at 10 a.m. Central Time.
I feel like they got robbed of actually seeing the end, seeing this through, seeing Luka develop, into hopefully a champion one day, and it feels like they never got to see the end to this. So this was very heartbreaking, and but now it's I think it's time to move on.
Dirk Nowitzki isn't the type to explode on national television. For more than 2 decades, he was the quiet heartbeat of Dallas loyal professional and never the guy to stir chaos. So when Dirk finally broke his silence and called his own franchise a clown show, the NBA world froze. This wasn't a hot take. This was a franchise legend stepping in because something had gone so horribly wrong that even he couldn't hold back anymore. Dirk didn't rant. He delivered something closer to a eulogy, a calm, devastating indictment of the Mavericks front office. And behind his words was one brutal truth. A single trade didn't just set the team back, it destroyed an entire era. The Luka deal wasn't just questionable. It was a disaster so big it split the franchise in half. But this story didn't begin with anger. It began with a season full of promise. Last season should have been the beginning of something special in Dallas. They weren't a fringe contender or a lucky playoff story. They were a true finals team built the right way, growing at the right pace, and led by a superstar who was only getting better. Luka wasn't just peaking, he was evolving, reading defenses faster, scoring more efficiently, and becoming the kind of leader a franchise waits decades for. And the roster around him. It finally made sense. Dallas had the length on the wings, the switchable defenders, and the rim protection that had been missing for years. The Gafford-Lively duo gave them energy and vertical spacing. The new version of Klay Thompson gave them shooting they desperately needed after the Boston series. Everything felt balanced, not flashy, but perfectly constructed for winning basketball. And the results proved it. Heading into Christmas, the Mavericks were riding a 14-3 stretch, not because of gimmicks or luck, but because their chemistry clicked naturally. Ball movement was crisp, roles were defined, and the team's confidence grew with every game. Fans weren't just hopeful they saw a future forming in real time. Then came the moment nobody expected. Luka went down, a simple injury on paper, but the spark that suddenly sent the front office spiraling into panic mode. Instead of trusting the foundation they spent years building, Dallas convinced itself the sky was falling. And instead of staying patient, Dallas pressed the red button.
This trade just made no sense. It made no sense to them, and really there was no explanation for it either. You go to the finals the year before, you give up all these assets to build really the team around Luka.
When the news dropped, the NBA didn't just react, it stopped breathing. In a move that felt ripped straight from an alternate universe, Nico Harrison pulled the trigger on a trade that sent Luka Doncic to the Los Angeles Lakers. Not for a package of young stars, not for a haul of picks, but for Anthony Davis, a generational talent on paper, and a walking medical file in reality. On one side of the trade was Luka, a 25-year-old megastar whose best basketball was still ahead of him. A player who had just carried Dallas to the finals and was on a trajectory that screamed future MVP, future champion. On the other side was AD, older, heavier, and battling injuries that had turned entire seasons into highlight reels of frustration. Dallas didn't just bet against the odds, they bet against common sense. And the return made everything worse. Dallas didn't gain depth picks or flexibility. They lost Luka Maxi Kleber and Markieff Morris in exchange for AD, Max Christie, and a single first-round pick half a decade away. Even inside the Mavericks organization, people were whispering the same question. Why? Around the league, the reaction moved fast from confusion to disbelief to outright jokes. Analysts didn't know how to break it down. Players didn't understand it. Fans assumed it had to be fake, but it wasn't. It was real, and it was catastrophic. And the nightmare only got darker once AD actually stepped on the court. Anthony Davis wasn't supposed to be the answer, but nobody expected him to become the breaking point of the entire franchise. Dallas gambled on the idea that AD could stay healthy long enough to justify trading away their future. Instead, he delivered exactly what everyone feared. Out of 42 possible games, Davis suited up for only 14. And even that number is misleading. He left 2 of those games early, meaning he actually completed just 12 full games in a Mavericks uniform. He never played 5 straight games, not once. Every time he stepped on the court, fans held their breath, not because he might dominate, but because he might limp off again. And while AD kept breaking down, the rest of the roster wasn't holding up either. Klay Thompson looked like a shadow of his former self, struggling to keep up with younger guards. Kyrie Irving missed the entire season, leaving Dallas with no veteran scorer, no leadership, and no stability. This wasn't simply bad luck, it was a structural collapse. Meanwhile, AD's contract was exploding like a financial time bomb. $54 million this season, $58 million next, and then an unfathomable $63 million, all for a player who can barely string games together. His trade value, already fragile, was plummeting with every missed matchup. And the deeper this team sank, the clearer it became. Dallas didn't just lose the Luka trade, they handcuffed their future in the process. And this is when Dirk stepped in, because someone had to.
You are a Mavs legend. I know that your phone has been blowing up. Why did this move have to happen?
Well, I think there's just too many distractions, too much going on to keep going this way. This move should have probably happened this summer, honestly. I didn't want this negative energy and this black cloud over the Cooper Flag era, but here we are now.
Dirk Nowitzki has spent his entire basketball life avoiding drama. For 21 years, he carried himself with the calm, steady dignity of someone who believed in letting his play speak louder than any headline. That's why when Dirk finally opened his mouth and torched the Mavericks front office, it didn't feel like commentary, it felt like a warning siren. His words hit harder because he almost never criticizes anyone, let alone the franchise he dedicated his life to. Dirk didn't dance around it. He called the Luka for AD trade senseless, a decision that never had a real explanation. And he didn't stop there. When asked why Nico Harrison's firing happened now, Dirk made it clear it shouldn't have. In his eyes, the move should have happened months ago, long before the season spiraled into hopelessness. Then came the line that froze the fan base. Dirk said the franchise had created a black cloud over the Cooper Flag era before it even began. For a legend as loyal as Dirk to imply that the front office poisoned their own future, that was more than criticism. It was an indictment. He spoke directly to the heart of Dallas, calling out how the fans were disrespected, how the franchise's history was disregarded, and how years of building around Luka were thrown away in a panic. In that moment, Dirk wasn't just a retired superstar. He became the voice of Dallas, saying everything the fans had been screaming into the void for months. But Dirk wasn't just angry, he was exposing a deeper flaw.
The leadership that we have is really elite. And you'll see next year when our team comes back, we're going to be competing for a championship.
The Mavericks' biggest problem isn't just injuries or contracts. It's an identity crisis the franchise refuses to acknowledge. This roster isn't one unified team. It's two timelines awkwardly stitched together, pulling in opposite directions. On one end, you have the aging, fragile veterans Anthony Davis, whose availability changes by the week, Kyrie Irving, brilliant but unpredictable and currently sidelined, and Klay Thompson, a former sniper now fighting his own decline. These are players meant to win right now if their bodies allow it. On the other end, you have the future Cooper Flag, Derek Lively, and Max Christie, young, energetic, and nowhere near their ceiling. They need time reps and a system built around their growth. They represent tomorrow, not today. History shows this never works. Teams that mix win-now veterans with developing prospects almost always end up stuck in the middle, not good enough to contend, not bad enough to rebuild. And that's exactly where Dallas is stranded. There's no clear direction, no shared purpose, no consistent identity. It's a roster built like a debate, half arguing for patience, half grasping desperately for one last veteran push. The result? Confusion on the court and chaos off it. A team trying to compete and rebuild at the same time, failing at both. Coaches can't set a system when half the roster needs playoff intensity and the other half needs developmental minutes. Players don't know whether to prioritize chemistry or experimentation. Fans don't know what the franchise actually wants. And the front office? They acted like they wanted everything without realizing that chasing both timelines means committing to neither. And the consequences of that confusion are already here. For Dallas fans, the hardest part isn't the losing. It's the story they never got to see. Luka wasn't just a superstar. He was the closest thing the franchise had to a second dynasty. Dallas was building him a real foundation. The defenders he needed, the rim, protectors he never had before the shooters to punish double teams. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't chaotic. It was a slow, steady climb towards something meaningful. And then, in a single panicked moment, that entire future was stolen. The Luka trade didn't just send away a player. It erased years of planning, years of sacrifice, years of carefully constructing a roster around a generational talent. Everything the Mavericks were building chemistry, identity, direction vanished overnight. That's why Dirk's comments cut so deep. He wasn't complaining about basketball. He was speaking for a city that spent years investing emotionally in Luka's journey. Dallas believed they were watching him grow into the champion he was destined to be right there in their uniform, on their court, in their story. And instead of letting that story finish, the front office ripped out the final chapters and replaced them with uncertainty. The emotional cost is massive. Fans feel betrayed. The franchise feels fractured. And even as the organization talks about moving forward, everyone can feel what was lost, the chance to see Luka's greatness bloom where it began. And that's why the next GM cannot repeat this mistake. Firing Nico Harrison was only step one. It removed the architect of the Luka for AD fiasco, but it didn't fix the foundation he cracked. The next general manager inherits a franchise at a crossroads, and the decisions made in the next few months will decide whether Dallas rises again or sinks into years of mediocrity. The roadmap isn't complicated, but it is harsh. It starts with the move everyone knows is inevitable: trade Anthony Davis immediately. His value is sinking by the week, and if Dallas waits any longer, they'll be stuck paying $60 million a year for a player who can barely finish a homestand. A new GM must move him now, even if the return isn't flashy. Flexibility is more valuable than another injured star. Next, the franchise needs to cut ties with Klay Thompson. He's earned respect for everything he's accomplished, but nostalgia doesn't win championships. He's no longer the shooter or defender he once was, and holding on to him only clogs minutes that should go to the next generation. On the other hand, Kyrie Irving should stay not as the face of the team, but as the mentor who can bridge eras. When he's healthy, he's still elite. When he's engaged, he's one of the smartest offensive minds in the league. His guidance could accelerate Cooper Flagg's development more than any coach can. And that's the real mission built entirely around the youth. Cooper Flagg, Lively, Christie, that's the timeline. In the modern NBA, teams don't win by juggling two eras. They win by committing fully to one. And in the middle of all this chaos, one truth rises above the rest. Dirk Nowitzki didn't step in because he wanted drama. He stepped in because no one else was willing to tell the truth. For months, Dallas fans have been shouting into the void, waiting for someone with real weight to say what they already knew. And finally, Dirk said it, calmly, reluctantly, but with the kind of honesty only a franchise legend can deliver. He didn't sugarcoat anything. He didn't protect egos. He said exactly what everyone was afraid to admit: the Luka trade will haunt this franchise for years. It wasn't a bad move. It was a historic mistake, one that shattered the identity Dallas spent a decade rebuilding. The damage isn't superficial. It's deep. It's emotional. It rewired the entire trajectory of the franchise. But Dirk's message wasn't entirely hopeless. He made it clear that recovery is possible, but only if the Mavericks finally confront the truth they've been avoiding. They must choose a direction. They must commit to a timeline. They must rebuild with purpose instead of panic. And that leaves Dallas with one haunting question, the one Dirk's words made impossible to ignore. Will Dallas finally learn? Or will this disaster become the moment their entire future slipped away forever?